Hi, everyone. Welcome to Blue Blood Television. I'm Dwayne Ballin. This segment being brought to you from Tyler's Tap Room, the Durham location in North Carolina. We are pleased to be joined in this segment by Bucky Brooks, who's the former North Carolina standout in football, also played in the NFL for 5 years, and is now an analyst with NFL.com and the NFL Network. Bucky, welcome in, and thanks for hanging out with us.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Dwayne.
Let's get to it first. We've got the draft coming up in a couple of days, so let's get your sense. Everyone has an opinion. If you're in that front office with the first pick, who do you pick?
Oh, I think Jadeveon Clowney should be the first pick. I think when you look at what he brings to the table, 6'6", 270 pounds, runs times in the 4.53 range, his ability to be a disruptive force off the edge will really complement what the Houston Texans do defensively. Having the opportunity to pair him beside the 2012 Defensive Player of the Year, J.J. Watt, a young talent in Whitney Mercilus, I think you now have a formidable front line that can challenge anyone in the AFC.
So where does a guy like Johnny Manziel, the Heisman Trophy winner from Texas A&M, come in? You have such a wide variance of opinions about what this young man can do in the NFL.
You know, he's such a different style of quarterback that it's hard for traditionalists to kind of rack their brains around what he can do in the league. But I think he's a runaround, mobile, athletic quarterback, a guy that really would excel in a scheme that really features a lot of movement-based passes. And I'm a firm believer that defensive-minded head coaches have a greater appreciation for Johnny Manziel because they understand the challenges that an athletic quarterback brings to the table. And so I would look for a team that is headed by a defensive-minded guy, a guy with a defensive background, to take a chance on Johnny Manziel so they can use those athletic attributes to really create chaos for a defense to really have to defend.
So in the end, how successful do you think he'll be?
Oh, I think he'd be a really successful quarterback. Having had the opportunity to be around him, having a chance to watch him, he's an ultra-competitive guy, and I think a lot of it gets lost in the celebrity and some of the things that he likes to enjoy off the field. But on the field, you won't find a guy that is more competitive, that likes winning, that enjoys kind of the big moments. When you're looking at a franchise quarterback, those are some of the traits that I'm looking for, and he has all those traits that you need.
Would Bridgewater be next from Louisville?
No, it's tough because I think you actually can rank Bridgewater and Manziel 1A and 1B depending on the style of play that you prefer. For me, Teddy Bridgewater is a pocket passer, probably the most polished pocket passer in the draft. And I know people have taken shots at him since his pro day, but when you watched him play in Louisville, there wasn't a doubt that he was the best quarterback in college football. I think someone is going to get a steal if he falls to the bottom of the first round.
Well, this is Blue Blood Television, so let's talk a little bit about the Tar Heels and the Blue Devils. Eric Ebron, the big tight end from Chapel Hill, a lot of people say he has an amazing upside in the NFL. What do you think?
Oh, he's a difference maker. He's one of the new hybrid-type tight ends to come into the league. The Jimmy Grahams, you think about what Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski and some of these guys have been able to do in terms of being matchup nightmares on the edge. That's what Eric Ebron is. I know a lot of people have likened him to Vernon Davis, who came out of Maryland, who has had success being a Pro Bowl tight end in San Francisco. And that comparison is pretty valid. He's not as explosive as Vernon Davis, but in terms of playing the position in an unconventional manner, he has that ability. He's basically a big-bodied wide receiver with the ability to make plays down the field while also giving you the toughness and the run after catch that you look for. He is a difference maker, and I think at the top of the board, someone is really going to fall in love with him and pull the trigger on him very, very early.
Well, who else from your former Tar Heels are we looking at? Along the defensive line, Williams?
You know, I think the big guy that is gaining a lot of steam has been Kareem Martin, the defensive end. Kareem Martin coming off the edge. There are a lot of people that kind of like his blue-collar mentality. He went to the Senior Bowl, was pretty impressive playing off the edge. And I know he didn't accumulate a lot of sacks throughout his career, but his senior season, he showed the ability to get to the quarterback. I think in the right system, in a 4-3 system that allows him to put his hand on the ground, he can make immediate contributions as a situational pass rusher.
As we shift over to the Duke Blue Devils, a lot of people are beginning to talk about Russ Cockrell. Good size for him. Does he have a shot?
Oh, he has a really good shot. I had a chance to work with him in the offseason, had a chance to watch him work out. And what I like about him is not only is he a really good athlete, he's super competitive. He has great technique. He does a good job of stepping up versus big games. Watched him personally against Texas A&M in the Chick-fil-A Bowl. He did a really good job of slowing down Mike Evans. I think when people watch the tape and watch how competitive and how versatile he is, I think he has a chance to be a mid to late round prospect in this draft.
Cockrell, of course, a defensive back. Anyone else jump out at you from the Blue Devil program?
I think, the funny thing is, like, their young guys really step out to me. Like, Jamison Crowder, the wide receiver, is a guy that I think we need to pay attention to. He is as smooth as they come at the receiver position. I think as we look ahead to next year's class, I think he could be a headliner because he's a really, really productive player, and he's certainly given the Tar Heels a lot of problems the last couple of years.
We're joined on Blue Blood TV. I said Blue Devil TV. Blue Blood TV by Bucky Brooks, former North Carolina receiver. Bucky, you're an analyst now. You're with NFL.com. You're preparing for the draft with the NFL Network. I don't think most people have an appreciation for what it takes for you to be prepared for Thursday. So why don't you share with our viewers what you actually have to go through to be ready for draft day?
It's funny, not being a player anymore. I guess this would kind of be my Super Bowl each year. Preparing for the draft, spending a lot of time in the fall going to games, watching a lot of tape, talking to coaches and scouts, trying to get a feel for who the top players are. And then once you get a feel for them, it's about evaluating them, ranking them in order, and really trying to get a firm grasp on how this draft shapes out according to what teams need and also how these players fit. And so everyone loves the mock drafts. Everyone loves to talk about the big boards and how you rank players. So for me, really, I spend most of the year doing a lot of research, a lot of talking, a lot of networking, trying to see if I can get it right, not only on draft day, but when we reflect back on how these players have played in 3 or 4 years, making sure that my evaluations were close to on par with what they end up being in terms of matching their potential.
You just said get it right and make sure it is right in hindsight. Well, when you look, the old adage is things are rarely what they appear to be. So do you find as you go through the process, you look at players, are you really surprised once you get that up-close inspection?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes that up-close first impression really speaks a lot. I think I've learned as a scout that you have to trust your gut, and what you really think about a player the very first time that you meet him, that you see him, typically holds true. Now, as we're going forward and looking at the draft and how teams match up, you're trying to really assess how a player fits into a prospective scheme. Because a lot of times when players flame out or they're a bust or it doesn't work out, it's really because the team that selected them misevaluated what the player would do in their scheme, and they really didn't put them in a situation where they could play to their strengths. Really, the National Football League is about finding great athletes and putting them in a situation where they can play to their talents. If you do that more times than not, you can win a lot of games.
And by way of review, you do believe that Jadeveon Clowney will be the #1 pick, correct?
Okay, I missed that last part of it, Dwayne.
I just say, but just so we want to button hook this segment, so I want to make sure, again, let our viewers know, you believe Jadeveon Clowney will be the first name called.
Oh, I think Jadeveon Clowney. I think we've heard a lot of talk about other people, Khalil Mack, some other guys, Johnny Manziel possibly being the #1 pick. But I think at the end of the day, I think Jadeveon Clowney will be the first name that we hear in the draft.
Bucky Brooks, NFL.com, NFL Network, 5-year NFL veteran, former North Carolina Tar Heel. Thanks for taking some time to join us on Blue Blood Television.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Okay, Bucky, we'll start the other one now, okay?
All right.
All right. Ready? Welcome to Blue Blood Television. I'm Dwayne Ballin. This segment brought to you from Tyler's Tap Room, their Durham location in North Carolina. Joining us is Bucky Brooks. Bucky, a former North Carolina Tar Heel, went to high school in the Raleigh area, played in the NFL for 5 years, and now working with the NFL Network and NFL.com. Bucky, it's funny, when I started thinking about talking to you, one of the first things I thought about was the rivalry with Duke, and you may not like this, but I remember 1989. Now, I know you remember that.
Absolutely.
Your freshman year at Carolina, Duke would go on to share the ACC championship with Virginia. But what I recall being at the game was, it was at your place at Kenan Stadium, Steve Spurrier threw the ball a lot, and they ended up winning, I think, 41-0. You remember that game?
Absolutely. I remember that game. As a freshman coming in, that was the final game of our 1-10 season, second recruiting class under Mack Brown. And more importantly, in that game, it wasn't the fashion in which Duke beat us, but after the game, they elected not to shake hands and took a team picture right under their scoreboard to kind of celebrate and commemorate their ACC championship. And we made a vow that we would never lose to Duke again after that. And so for the next, I guess, 20 years, I want to say for 18 of those years, the Carolina football teams held true to that promise. And it's only been recently that Duke has kind of shifted the tide in that series. But that game served as the impetus for us to kind of turn the program around and really to kind of dominate Duke in that rivalry game.
I remember the picture being taken under the scoreboard because I was in the press box, and I remember hearing quite a few expletives coming from some Carolina athletic officials about that Spurrier did that. But do you know that that picture is in Spurrier's office at South Carolina right now and has a prominent position? When you walk into his office down in Columbia, that's one of the first things you see.
Well, I mean, I know it was a crowning moment for him, not only just beating us, but to, you know, raise the Duke program to the point where they can win the ACC title. That's a significant accomplishment. It's something that Carolina has wanted to do since 1981. So I understand the celebratory nature of that game and of that moment, taking a picture. And I may have stolen that with some of the high school teams that I've coached in the back. But at the time, being a 19-year-old freshman and really being disappointed in the outcome of the game, that really inspired us, not only in our off-season workouts, but whenever we had the opportunity to play Duke, we wanted to make sure that we made them feel the wrath of Carolina on the heels of that disappointing loss.
Now, you may not remember this, but this is another thing I remember. The next time, I think it was 2.5 or maybe 3 years later because you had an injury year, but when they came back to Kenan Stadium when you played, I remember you beat them. I happened to be down on the sideline, and I remember seeing you squatting down and almost smirking. It was as if you were taking it all in. Do you remember that?
You know, those games were always big games. The rivalry was intense because those guys were friends. I mean, we're only 8 miles apart. We partied together. We hung out together. A lot of us went to high school together. So it was a little personal. And so, yeah, I do remember kind of enjoying the moment. Anytime we had the opportunity to beat them, I relished the opportunity to beat them because for so long, after they won that ACC title, the Keith Ewells, the Walter Jones, those guys would harass me. And so it was always very, very personal when we had the opportunity to match up with Duke.
What was your most memorable moment? Your senior year was a great year, but what was your most memorable moment in that series?
You know, my redshirt junior year, when I think that's the big game, it was kind of, I would say, my coming out party. 5 catches, 185 yards. And really, it was an opportunity for us to go to the bowl game because that put us in the Peach Bowl. And so for so long, we desperately wanted to have an opportunity to play in the postseason. And to win that game allowed us the opportunity to get an invitation to the Peach Bowl. So having an opportunity to play well in that game and to be a key contributor for my team, that game, that's really one of the defining moments of my college career.
Did it mean a little more for you, Bucky, too, the fact that you grew up in the Triangle? All the players, they come from all over the country, they play in the rivalry, and it becomes a part of them when they're here. But for you, you literally grew up in the media market that is home to Duke and Carolina. So did it mean a little more to you?
Yeah, it's a very special rivalry to me because I grew up being a Tar Heel fan. Like from day one, I've always been a Tar Heel. I always paid attention not only to the basketball team, but the football team. Those Duke-Carolina games, from as far as I can remember, were always shootouts. And so to have a chance to be a part of that, to be a part of history, to be a part of putting Carolina back on the map in terms of being in the postseason, going to a bowl game, and to do it over Duke, yeah, it was a very, very special moment for me.
What's your favorite moment in the basketball rivalry?
You know, there's so many, you know, growing up in that rivalry, but I would say 1992, 91? 92, number 1 versus number 2.
I remember
Duke
that.
and Carolina, Christian Laettner that year coming over to our building in the Dean Dome, Carolina winning the game. But I had an opportunity at halftime. I won a campus-wide slam dunk contest. So to win the dunk contest and to also have an opportunity to party with the players and to win the game and to rush the floor and all that stuff after knocking off Duke, because at the time Duke was on their way to win their 2nd national championship, that was a huge moment for us. So I think every student at Carolina remembers that game during that era.
You know, it's funny. I remember that game too because I remember at halftime. We were about to go get something to eat. You know, take a break, and when they called the halftime highlights for the slam dunk, and I saw you walk out there, a couple of people said, "What's Bucky doing out there in the slam dunk contest?" But you know what? You acquitted yourself quite well.
Thanks so much. It's one of those things that a bunch of football players did it on a whim. They had the prelims at Carmichael Auditorium the week before. And so, obviously, as a Carolina fan, to be able to play on that hallowed floor, and Carmichael was one thing, but then to go to the Dean Dome, and even though I was a football player and I'd run track at Carolina, basketball was still the thing at Carolina. Right. And so to be on the floor in that moment, you're talking about a big game, 20,000 people there. I mean, that was a big-time moment for me, and I think it's one of those things that I always look back on and laugh at, because I think it did a lot, not only for my confidence, but to just be able to say, like, guys, I went back and I was able to do it in that big moment.
Do you remember what your winning dunk was?
Oh, my gosh, Dwayne. I remember touching the backboard and slamming it backwards and doing some other crazy stuff that I can't imagine doing now at my age. But it was really it was so improvisational, just going up there and kind of feeling the crowd. But it was the energy from the crowd that I remember, because the game was heated. And so the crowd, even at halftime, there was a buzz going through the stands. And so I remember feeding off of that momentum.
Do you think you will ever get tired of Duke Carolina basketball?
Absolutely not. You know, no matter what, no matter how bad Carolina or Duke are, what the records are, I think you throw them out. There's a mutual respect and admiration, because so many times Carolina will win the title one year, Duke will win it the next year. Duke will win the title, Carolina will win it. So for me, ACC basketball is all about the Duke-Carolina rivalry and watching it take place, not only in the Dean Dome, but watching it take place in Cameron Indoor. I think there's that level of respect, but there's also that bitterness, that disdain for those colors. And so, yeah, I mean, as much as I love Carolina football, Carolina basketball is really where it's at.
Well, the football rivalry is stepping up now, with Duke having the success it did last season and acquitting themselves quite well against Texas A&M in the Peach Bowl. And now you have the specter of a Thursday night game coming up, a first ever nationally televised game, Duke and Carolina, on Thursday night coming up this fall. That says a lot about, I guess, where the programs are and where Duke has gotten to.
Yeah, you definitely can tell the respect of the programs by the way the TV schedules them. Do they put them on a primetime stage? Last year when Carolina had the chance to play Miami on Zero Dark Thursday, that was a big game on the national scope. To now have an opportunity to do it again against Duke, it not only says a lot about Carolina's respect, but it says the respect that people now have on the big stage for Duke. And so to put that rivalry on Thursday night where all of the country can see it, I'm excited to watch it take place. And I think it could be a defining moment for Carolina football going forward if they're able to knock off Duke and really make a play into the ACC championship game or something like that, because I'm sure they have lofty expectations this year.
In conversations with your former teammates and with current players, can you sense the level of intensity beginning to ratchet up?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think the level of intensity between Duke and Carolina has always existed, but I think now there's kind of the rush to become ACC champions. And I think when you see Duke make the step that they make, to go to a big-time game, to play in a big stage against a big team against Texas A&M, Carolina certainly wants to have the same opportunities. And so I believe Larry Fedora, his coaching staff, and all the players and the alums have rallied behind the program. I think the time is now. I think people are really waiting for Carolina to be not only a top 25 program, but a team that is consistently talked about as one of the finer football programs in the country. It can be done. It's been done in other institutions where you have a solid basketball and football program. It's time for it to get done in Chapel Hill.
Now, you do realize that the folks at Duke are going to try to transfer Wallace Wade into Cameron Outdoor Stadium on that Thursday night. You know that, right? Oh,
I'm sure it will be a festive atmosphere. I'm sure for the first time in a long time, it will be a kind of a raucous environment for both teams to really kind of revel in. I think as a visitor, there's nothing like walking into an opposing stadium and being able to quiet the crowd. I think the Tar Heels will love the opportunity to go in there and walk away with a win.
Care for a prediction?
Oh, I think Carolina's going to win. I don't care whether it's about 1 or 100. I believe the Tar Heels will find a way to get it done. Even though 2 years in a row they've been able to find a way to keep us from winning and taking the victory bell back, I think this is the year that we take the bell back to Chapel Hill.
Former Tar Heel great, Bucky Brooks, NFL.com, NFL Network. Thanks for hanging out with us on Blue Blood TV.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on.